Mom, look! A rat has bitten this mister's face! I heard these words from a kid passing me by. The only thing I could do was to pull my hood down over my head. Then I turned into the back street. Hey, my name's Chase. Well, a year ago, I looked totally different, but once an accident turned my life upside down. I didn't think it would go this far and I'd become a boogeyman for small kids. Want to know what happened? Then watch this video to the end. I promise I will tell you everything as it is. Okay, a year ago, I graduated from high school. Then I went to college. I was one of those guys whose parents and even the whole school were proud of. I studied very well. I took part in various contests representing my school. I always behaved well. I did what my parents told me. I did not hang out with my friends late, and I spent all my free time reading books at home. I think you've already realized my life was very boring. It was not interesting at all. Ever since I was a kid, my mom had always been afraid I would get involved with bad company. She was afraid I would start skipping classes, smoke weed, drink alcohol, and do some other bad things. While other kids enjoyed hanging out with friends and doing some crazy things, I was always buried in books and homework. Therefore, I had no problems with entering college. The problems that I really had were my parents. They did not want me to study in another city. They were afraid I would not be able to live on my own, being so far from them. I could hardly convince them I needed that very college, because I wanted to become an architect. That was my dream. In the end, Mom and Dad gave in, but they made me promise I would constantly call them and tell them how I was doing. Remember I said my mom was very worried one day I would get involved in a bad company? So when I entered college, I was at the heart of this company, so to speak. My roommate Henry was 2 years older than me, and he had the reputation of being the greatest college party starter. Even when I first met him, I realized at once I would never have a quiet life in the dorm with him. Henry looked at my perfectly pressed shirts and stacks of books, whistling. Then he said he's gonna take care of my upbringing. He immediately realized how boring my life was. I wish I'd known at once what the heck he was talking about. Well, I've never been to a party during my school years. Never, ever. At first, my parents just wouldn't let me go. Then I grew up and I didn't want it myself. I was all about entering college. I preferred reading a book or watching my favorite series at home instead of loud music and noisy company. So when Henry announced there was a freshman party this weekend, I gave him a poker face. Apparently, he wasn't going to give up. He said if I didn't go to the party would go to us. I mean, right in our room. And for some reason, I thought this guy was capable of anything. Perhaps you can imagine the nature of student parties, especially the freshman ones. I was in shock when I arrived there. I didn't like anything that was going on. Some strangers came up to me being quite drunk and tried to communicate. I jumped away from them. I tried to behave in such a way that no one would see me, especially my roommate Henry. As ill luck would have it, just when I was about to leave the party, Henry caught me by the hand and dragged me towards some noisy and hell-drunk group. He said it was too early to leave, like I would miss all the fun. And in his opinion, the fun was some stupid game where the loser had to fulfill the winner's wish. I will not specify all the details, but anyway, I lost. Henry rubbed his hands with delight and whispered something to the girl who was the winner. Seems like he did it on purpose to make me do something shameful and stupid, a thing I would regret for the rest of my life. I dreaded my fate, wondering what would happen if my parents found out I was running around naked on campus, or, for example, kissing the teacher right in the middle of class. Well, are all the tasks for losers the same? Apparently, I do not understand anything in such games, because the girl desired me to get a piercing. Just like that, piercing, right at the party. One senior student who was at the party had his own studio. He had all his tools at the party. He knew there would always be someone who would want to do something like this. I couldn't resist. Otherwise, they would give me a bad nickname for the rest of my college life. I must admit, that was a fairly simple punishment compared to the terrifying things I had already imagined in my mind. An ear piercing is something that every person can do on his own, and you do not need to wear any earring later. The hole would heal up. The task was only to do it. So they took me to Scott, the piercing master. He was pleased to see me, so he took his tools and started. Maybe I had an adrenaline rush because it didn't even hurt. Just a light prick and a temporary earring to keep the puncture in order. It was easy. The next day in college, I went to Scott myself. I wanted to learn how to properly care for the puncture. I didn't want blood poisoning to happen, and the skin around the puncture started drying. At night, I was surfing the internet, and I read a lot of scary stories. Scott explained everything to me. As he was leaving, he winked at me, saying he would be glad to see me again. Normally, people never stop after the first piercing, and who knew this was 100% my case? After the party game and my punishment, some people from college started treating me in a different way. They would come up and talk to me, or sit down with me at the canteen to have lunch together. I understood this game allowed me to relax and get more comfortable with others. One morning, I was looking at my earring in the mirror. Suddenly, I realized one puncture looked somehow boring. Then I scrolled Instagram, watching different piercing photos. I decided I wanted 2 more earrings next to the first one, and something in my second ear. I didn't delay my decision. I went to Scott's studio that night. I did everything as I planned. Scott just smiled at me, saying he knew right away I would come again. He could see in my eyes I even liked that first puncture, which was the game of punishment. Of course, Henry was surprised when I returned to the dorm that evening, having my new piercings. He said he didn't expect this from me. Then he noticed that my wear, all these boring shirts, jumpers, and trousers, didn't really fit my new look. The very next weekend, he dragged me to the mall to buy something he thought would be more suitable for a tough guy with a piercing like me. Honestly, if my mom ever saw those ripped jeans and a leather jacket, she would faint. But I really liked my new look. At first, everyone was surprised at college. Then, guys started giving me compliments. Girls started paying attention to me. Anyway, I enjoyed these changes in my life. Following my example, Henry decided to pierce his ear too. I went with him to Scott's studio, just for the company. In the end, I couldn't resist doing a barbell in my eyebrow. It looked really cool. Over time, I realized piercings makes me more confident. It's like I'm becoming a completely different person, my alter ego. Anyway, after about 6 months, I had more than 20 piercings on my face. Ears, eyebrows, nose, lip, tongue, cheeks. I couldn't stop, even though I knew it was too much. But most of all, I was worried about my parents. What would happen when they saw me like this? I often called them on the phone, but I always refused to make video calls, making different excuses. My life has changed. I continue to study very well, but I often went to parties and hangouts. Henry even took me to a couple of late-night biker meetings. I like the atmosphere of adrenaline and speed. I got a girlfriend, Grace. Unlike me, she was more interested in tattoos. We met at Scott's studio, so together we looked like a very unusual couple. But I knew I couldn't avoid meeting with my parents. I had to come over for Christmas. They knew I would be on vacation from college, so no excuses would work. I was hoping my parents would just accept me the way I was. As it turned out, no. My mom was first very joyful to see me, but she instantly changed her face and turned pale. My dad just froze and almost fainted. I knew they weren't ready for this, but in the end, this is my life, my body. I'm the one to decide what to do with it. My mom started crying. My dad started yelling at me. Well, I'm not going to describe the whole scandal, but my dad demanded me to take off all these rings and earrings out immediately. That was his condition to talk to me. Honestly, I wish I hadn't listened to him. I got holes all over my face instead of piercings. So my face looked like this. My face looked like a firing ground. My mom fainted when she saw me. I decided I should get them to cool down a little bit. So I decided to take a walk in the neighborhood, giving my parents some time to recover from the shock. It was already evening and it was getting dark. I walked without even thinking I had left the house with a scary whole face. Suddenly, I heard a scream nearby, and someone started crying. It was a little girl who pointed at me. She was saying to her mom I was a scary monster. I pulled my hood on tight to hide my face. I tried to get out of there as quickly as possible, but I met another kid in the street next. He jumped away when he saw me. He grabbed his mom by the hand, saying my face had been chewed by rats. I hid in a narrow street and looked at myself in the shop window. Only then I realized how ugly my face was, and what a scary look I had. Well, what's done is done. My parents have to accept me. Anyway, now I rarely communicate with my parents. They prefer to call me, asking me just some everyday things. Both mom and dad still don't accept my new look. I started worrying because of this. I thought it was all for nothing, because I disappointed my parents. What do you think of my story? Maybe I don't need to worry, and my parents are just too conservative, because this is my life, and I can do whatever I want. Write your answers in the comments below. If you like my story, Click thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Turn on the notifications to always stay tuned. Bye, everyone.